Thank you, and welcome this afternoon. It's certainly a tough act to follow. We've had some amazing presentations, and to follow that video and then the words from Diane is certainly is a tough act to follow. I am Michelle MacKinnon. I'm the Early Learning Coordinator of Holy Spirit Catholic Schools. And I have to share that is in Lethbridge, and I did warn them prior to that they had to behave themselves in the panel out there, but apparently they are very interested in your scarf, Diane. So as Barb had indicated this morning, it was really tough when asked to do this presentation. What do we focus on? What is it that we do to promote inclusion within our schools, and especially in those early years? And so I'm just going to give you an overview of what's happening in Holy Spirit schools in our early learning environments, and our philosophy that every child certainly is a perfect fit in every environment, and that's the title of my project. So we really have a philosophy that it's not about the child being ready for an early learning program. So often I get telephone calls from parents who, for whatever reason, feel that their 3-year-old or their 4-year-old or their 5-year-old may not be ready for a program because, well, it's really difficult to understand them. Their mobility may have some issues. But my response always is, it certainly is not about the child being ready for the program. It is about the program being ready for the child. And that's the basis that we start with. We are, in Holy Spirit, we are a rural-urban school division. We do have 10 pre-kindergarten programs in our elementary schools. And so the pre-kindergarten programs serve our 3- and 4-year-olds in our communities. And so the children that come to us for our pre-kindergarten programs naturally filter into our kindergarten and then into our grade 1 systems in that school. So they're starting in the school where they will be, where their community will be for their elementary years. So that in and of itself certainly is an advantageous for us to be able to do that. We have really no formula for enrollment. It's open door policy, come one, come all. And then we figure out as we go along where each child fits in the formation of the program. And today I'm going to talk more about the foundation work that we do as opposed to specialized programming. So you're all very familiar, I'm sure, with the pyramid of intervention. In keeping with my puzzle pieces, of course we start with universal supports. So that's the foundation. That's what we have accessible in all our programs for all of our children. Then we have our targeted supports for children who may need a little bit of different program supports and to be successful within the program. And then we have specialized supports. And the specialized supports are just as they say, it's the few, that 10% of the children in the program that may need things that are very specialized. But everything happens within the context of the foundational of the universal supports, that foundation. And building that foundation to us is really the critical point of building an inclusive system for the philosophy that we want. When we have a strong foundation, as we all know, when there's a strong foundation in place, it's far easier to tweak the foundation so that you can have the targeted and the specialized supports that are needed for all children to be successful. So we're going to start with the environmental supports that we put in place, and a lot of this is going to be very similar to a lot that you've heard already. Our frontline staff in our programs, we have a program leader for our 3- and 4-year-old programs. these are not certificated teachers. We've chosen to employ program leaders who are early childhood educators. So that is their background. Then in every program has a speech language assistant who, and the speech language center is just one of the other play centers that all of the children filter through. It's designed to address language and speech, but really every child has an opportunity to visit that center, and it's really not an issue getting children to participate in that center, because typically the speech language assistants have the coolest games, and they have the most engaging activities, and so it's really quite neat. We do have program unit funded assistants who help to support children who are on a higher level of support need. But the thing is that this is not, we don't want anything that looks like a Velcro assistant, or we don't want an adult who's attached to a child. So while each person has their individual role, they do work as a team to support. This frontline team is supported by a transdisciplinary team. We have certificated teachers, we have speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, psychologists, behavior therapists, and all of those therapeutic specialists, as Corinne had mentioned, they provide the support directly in the program. Where this is about providing natural support within the natural context of the learning environment. And again, we have moved away from that pull-out speech and language or therapeutic model, that more medical-based model, into a more embedded an embedded system. Because what we found 5 years ago was that the children would go, and they would go to the speech room or the janitor's closet, and they would make a perfect desk there, but hey, you only have to use that language and use those skills when you're off in the special room. It doesn't really apply to anything else. So when they came back to program, again, because the capacity was not built within the program, there was really generalization, and carryover was limited at best. So when we look at some of the environmental supports that are in place in all of our programs, we look at things that are very, I guess, pretty typical. Visual scheduling is something that's in place as a universal support for all children. So having the daily routine or the daily schedule of events up there in a visual for all of the children supports all the children knowing where they're at in time. And some children may need visual supports of a higher level, and it's much easier to integrate that into the natural flow of the day when there's visual supports for all of the children. It is a play-based program, looking at the play being the most important part of a child's day, and looking at that play being very open and being very, the children are the ones who will determine where it goes and how far it goes, and I think that's a very important part too. We don't have a timer set that the robotics of filtering through or cycling through play-based centers, but the play-based centers, all the children, they're accessible to all children. Peer support is kind of an ace in our hole, because a lot of times those natural leaders in your groups are the ones who are going to motivate and have your children participating, because it's fun. It is a lot of fun and so that intrinsic motivation of keeping up with your buddies, that's really is an environmental support that's there in an inclusive environment. The physical design of the classroom itself, we make sure that there's lots of pre-thinking in how the physical environment is set up. We want there to be free movement of the children. There needs to be quiet areas for children who are choosing to do quiet activities. There needs to be space to get the movement in that they need. I spoke already of the language center. And the adaptive equipment that are necessary for some children to be successful with some of the tasks or activities during the day are quite, they're intriguing to all the children. So if there's low-tech assistive devices needed for one child, and we're even moving into some high-tech assistive devices that we make generally available. So if Johnny needs to use a pencil grip, well, there's pencil grips everywhere. Any child can use one if they choose to. So making those foundational environmental supports a part of just raising the bar so it supports all children. The next piece that I'm going to talk about is about professional development. And professional development is really a cornerstone of how we move through providing and developing our foundation. So our staff in our early learning programs have access to community and in-house professional development opportunities. There's lots of different topics that we cover. Music, we've done sessions on the impact of sensory integration and behavior as communication, looking at the use of technology, looking at parent engagement, fine motor development, and again, it being about the process, not the product. And I loved in the clip that we saw earlier that the quote of moving from craft to creation, and I think that really is what we want to be doing with all of it. It's not craft time; it's creation time. And so having our occupational therapists and our full team making that look real in the classrooms and making people feel comfortable with what that looks like. Our biggest professional development investment has been a program through Hannon's Center, the Hannon Center in Toronto, and it's called Learning Language and Loving It. This is a research-based, developmentally appropriate way to promote a child's social language and literacy development through everyday activities. It's quite an extensive program. There's 8 3-hour in-class sessions for the adults, and in between the facilitators of the program, we go out and we do on-site videotaping of the people using the skill that's been taught, and then we have time with that video to sit one-on-one with the participants to review the video and to do some coaching. And it's more about them discovering how they're using this strategy really well, or how they perhaps thought they might have been using the strategy very well, but when they see the video playback, they see places where they could tweak. So when we look at the skills gained through learning language and loving it, one of the first things that we talk about is those adults becoming responsive partners. So often when we see adults interacting with children, they fall into the role of either being a timekeeper, maybe a cheerleader, maybe they might be just a little too quiet, maybe they may take the role of a director. So they're directing where and when and what will happen. So we want to develop those adults into responsive, communicative partners for the children, and that modeling, moving to peer-to-peer, being responsive partners peer-to-peer as well. The next is a preliminary piece as well, is looking at all of the children in your group and every child as a unique participant in that group. And as a unique participant, as a child and as a group of adults, we all have different conversational styles, and we all have different, well, I think this group probably is all at the same stage of language development, but with our younger children, they are at different levels of stages of language development. But recognizing where those children are in those stages so that we can provide natural supports to scaffold and to build on the skills that they already have. Next is and this one is particularly challenging. In the first 2 weeks after the second session, the participants are challenged to go back to their programs and not use any questions with the children. They're challenged to use comments only. And the reason is because when we question, we tend to use more test-taking questions or those lower level questions with children, because we don't really, for the most part, we tend to lower the bar a bit. And a lot of times, 2 minutes? Oh my goodness, a lot of times it takes really, really, okay, I'm gonna talk really fast now. A lot of times it takes that removing the questions completely, because children shut down if you start to question them too much. And using comments actually helps to extend language. We always want to be following the child's lead. Initially, following their lead is again, a challenge for the adults. So we want to follow their lead in play as well as in conversation. And we want, when we start to look at interactions, we want to be scaffolding the interactions. Some children I'm sure you've recognized, are the observers. They'll just stand back and watch. So we have to recognize where they are so that we can build the skills that they need to move forward. And we want to be encouraging interaction in group settings. And some children may never move to interaction in a large group setting, but maybe a small group setting, or even for some children, a one-to-one setting is a challenge. And facilitating play with peers is really a big skill that's gained through learning language and loving it. And it's all looking at again, looking at that responsive partner. So next, the team approach. We're all working as a team. The parents are an integral part of that team. And from the very beginning, we meet the parents where they're at as well. And we genuinely listen to what their hopes, needs, and aspirations are for their child. And we want there to be, within that team, multiple opportunities for children to develop a relationship with a responsive partner in the environment they're in. And finally, our philosophy. And our philosophy is pretty straightforward. We have a philosophy of providing a developmentally appropriate, play-based learning environment where all children are welcome and achieve their potential. Now, I do have, and I promise it's 1 minute.
Build 'em up, build 'em up, build 'em higher. Build 'em up, up, up into the sky. Build 'em up, build 'em up, build 'em higher. Build 'em up, 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 up into the sky. Come on, I think I need some help for this.
Oh, okay, we can come along.
Here we go. Build 'em up, build 'em up, build 'em higher. Build 'em up, up, up into the sky. Build 'em up, build 'em up, build 'em higher. Build 'em up, 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 up into the sky.
So how was that?
We got some more. Oh, that's great. Build 'em up, build 'em up, build 'em higher. Build 'em up, up, up into the sky. Build 'em up, build 'em up, build 'em higher. Build 'em up, 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 up into the sky. Now that's great.
Thank you.